Hey, welcome back, everybody. It is a beautiful day to be alive here in southern Utah from the Findlay Hyundai Studios. Thank you for making us part of your day. I always appreciate you taking time to listen to us talking sports with you. And we're really excited about our next guest. He's in town. We don't get the commissioner of the WAC in town every single day, but we do today, and he's graciously joined us in studio. And Brian Thornton, good morning. Good to see you, my friend.
I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, back in southern Utah. I think the first time we met, it was halftime of a football game. It was the first year, and I was doing the broadcast, and you and I got chat. And I remember thinking I was very impressed with your composure and your leadership and your innovative thoughts that you had. And that was, 3 years ago. Now you're going on year 4 on the job here as commissioner of the WAC. And all things considered, how's the growth been for the conference since you took over?
I've really enjoyed it. Like you said, it's been almost 4 years since I was here last. And, I was talking to a group of Utah Tech donors and administrators last night, and I just love coming to St. George. Every time I come here, you realize how beautiful this place is, how much growth is taking place. It seems like they're having a ribbon cutting almost every single day on campus. And this region is really taking off. And this is one of my favorite places to visit, and I look forward to continuing to do more in the future.
Yeah, next time bring your golf clubs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, get those sticks out. It'll be a little cooler next time you come. If you come a little bit later on in the fall, but it's never too hot to play for the locals around here. It's been a hot summer, though, that being said. Hey, I want to get into this just a little bit because we were just talking about it. We were talking about the QR codes with Oklahoma State, and we're talking about the Arizona receiver and quarterback Fafita that are getting a jet deal, and you're going to be able to, have hours on their private jet. I'm just curious your thoughts on NIL. You were a college athlete. You played college basketball for a couple of universities back in the day. Do you wish there was NIL when you were a player back in the day?
Sure. I think everybody does. When I think back on my time as a student athlete, look, I was blessed. I went to school at a time where when there was no NIL, and that was okay. I also went to school at a time where there was no transfer portal, and that was okay too. I was certainly blessed to attend 2 great universities at Vanderbilt and Xavier, and got a free education and got a free MBA and built relationships and those types of things that will last a lifetime. But if you're going to tell me that I had an opportunity to make a couple $100,000 while doing it, then I certainly wouldn't have turned that down.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing, just the landscape of college football with, schools come to mind like Oregon where Phil Knight just writes a blank check and says, go get whoever you want. I mean, as a smaller conference in the WAC, we can't compete with that.
Yeah, it certainly has created a unique dynamic without question. And I think what you're finding is that historically, the rules and regulations within the NCAA have been slanted towards institutions. That was for all time, whether it was no ability to have movement from a transfer standpoint, no ability to make outside money other than, your room and board and tuition. And the pendulum's probably swung maybe even too far, at this point, because there aren't real guardrails that are currently up right now as it pertains to NIL. You can look at some of the stuff that's going on with the NCAA right now when they have this house settlement. And I'm sure that you guys have talked about that to a certain extent, but you're talking about a settlement that's going to pay out $2.7 billion over the next 10 years in back payments to student athletes. You're going to have football players that played at the Power 4, Power 5 level at a minimum. They're going to be making over $100,000 over the next 10 years. Some are going to be making over $1 million, and that's in back payments, nothing current.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. It's like I want to call the Utah Motor Division and say, hey, that ticket I got when I was going 65, that road is now 65, and that was 8 years ago. Can I have my money back for that ticket? Because it's not speeding now. Like, it's crazy to me. And I feel bad for players that are like, 2012, 13, 14, 15 that aren't going to get – it's like the cutoff is 2016, right?
You keep going further back to get to me.
Yeah.
You haven't got to me yet.
That story was like kind of an eye-opening story when I saw that. No question about it. What's the main talk in your office with your team and your employees and everybody in the WAC? Like, is there a lot of NIL talk, or is it very little? Are you guys thinking progressively like we're seeing other schools do, or what's the latest?
It's interesting. At the conference office, we don't pay student athletes. We don't have NIL deals per se. It's more the institutions that are facing that on a day in and day out basis. But as a conference office, we certainly want to be creative, we want to be innovative, and we want to be forward thinking in terms of what are ways that we can help our institutions. We have brought forward a couple opportunities to our institutions where they might be able to generate some additional funds, some NIL money to be delivered to their collectives. Also, last year we were the first conference in the country to create an NIL opportunity around our basketball championship. We worked with one of our corporate sponsors and was able to create an NIL opportunity for a men's and a women's basketball player. They happened to be our MVPs at our basketball championship, where they were able to have an NIL opportunity from our conference championship. And again, we were the first in the country to do that. So we're always trying to look for ways to help our institutions. We know that it's hard. You talk about Phil Knight and some of the Power 4, Power 5 conferences, that money seems to grow on trees, although it really doesn't. And then as that filters down to the mid-major level, it's difficult. It's a challenge to find that money. It's a challenge to find collectives and donors that are willing to continue to pour that money into your institutions. And you have to find, passive ways. What are ways that you can generate money that don't create that donor fatigue? Because, as you continue down this path, this is not just a one-year problem. This is something that's going to be perpetual going forward. And when you're thinking about being an athletic director, that's a really challenging job right now when it comes to raising money. I'm sure, Ken and others, like, that's their main focus, is how do I generate money to offset some of these things? And, you have a handful of donors. Certainly, you don't have a plethora of big dollar donors at most mid-major institutions. And it's hard to keep knocking on that door and saying, hey, last year I had this quarterback and he was really good and I need X amount of money for him. And then that quarterback either does well and he leaves, or he doesn't do well or gets hurt and, isn't as successful. And then you got to go back to that same person and knock on their door again and say, I know I told you about Brian last year, but let me tell you about Tom. Yeah. I need to do it again this year. And he actually needs a little bit more money. So, at some point, those donors are going to start to get some real fatigue in terms of being asked. And then you're trying to balance that with upgrades to facilities and scholarships and things of that nature. So it certainly creates an interesting dynamic and a problem. And I think the more that institutions and conference offices are certainly trying to help, can create ways where they can generate some passive revenue that can go into these collectives and go into NIL that hopefully will alleviate some of that pressure from a donor standpoint.
This brings up a good point. I think Devin and I talk about it all the time, but where's that fine line on ROI, that return on investment? Because like you said, you have to go back and try to knock on these doors again and again to get these different donors to continue to donate. But where's that fine line where they're like, all right, I don't know, I've already put money in it and I don't see progress? And how does it kind of benefit or hurt you going forward, going with those same donors and things like that?
Well, I think right now, especially at the mid-major level, but I think it's across college athletics in general. Right now, NIL is intrinsic. It comes down to, what do the donors feel like is their own personal ROI?
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about paying some of these numbers that we're seeing, one thing that we know about NIL is that everyone's lying. So the numbers that we hear, they may be true and they may not be true. But when you're talking about a donor who wants to pour a couple $100,000 into a student athlete, there's not a lot of return on that investment. Whether it be NetJets or whether it be a car dealership, I've never seen somebody go buy a car from a dealership because the quarterback happened to be driving a car from that car dealership. Now, if they do, all the power to them. But I think it's more about the owner of that car dealership is a huge fan of the university, and he has the resources and the means to want to support that university. And that's the vehicle in order to get money in the pocket of those student athletes. And it's a pride thing too. It's a pride thing to say not only that your university is being successful, but everybody has egos, right?
Yeah.
It's also nice to be able to say, you know what? Not only is my university successful, but I had a big piece in that. I had a hand in the success of my university because that guy right there, hey, that's my guy. When you're talking to your friends and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's in the eye of the beholder. I don't know that a lot of the NIL deals and whatnot out there are necessarily great from a return on investment from a from a business standpoint,
Yeah.
but I think right now it's more intrinsic than anything else.
Yeah, and your collectives in some ways could be competing with your corporate partnerships, right? Some people have to decide: do I support this kid, or do I put a banner up at the football field or inside the basketball arena? So you're asking sponsors to do a lot, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Fans are fans, and they want to be a part of something special. And when a coach comes calling, they're hoping that they can help them get that missing ingredient to get them that extra win or two, and get them maybe to a bowl game or whatever the case might be. In some cases, a national championship. What do you think? What do you think about the eventual salary cap, and what do you think about some loyalty back to the schools when they do find these NIL deals for student athletes? Do you think that kids should have to stay 2 years or a third year if they're getting X amount of money?
Well, I think that if we get to that point, that's going to be collective bargaining. Now you're talking about more of a professional model where you have contracts and things of that nature. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but we're not there yet. These types of things take time. It took a long time for the NFL or the NBA to get these collectively bargained processes. You're seeing it at the highest levels where now, because of the House settlement, the Power Four conferences, all of those institutions are going to have to pour an extra $20 to $25 million of additional benefits to their student athletes starting next year. So we're already starting to trend in that direction, but we certainly aren't to the point where kids are going to be locked in. That's actually going back to where we kind of were when kids weren't able to transfer with any kind of freedom. I think what you're finding is that the NCAA has less control of these things than it ever has before. Now, so many of these decisions are being made through Congress and through courts, where they used to be kind of legislated from the NCAA. And the NCAA is a collection of its institutions. And those institutions, when they don't like the rules, now they're starting to sue themselves. And that's how we've gotten into some of this hot water. So, from my standpoint as a fan, as somebody who loves college athletics, I would like to see there be a time where people stayed a little bit longer. There was a little bit more stick-to-itiveness, but we know that it's a capitalist culture that we live in. If you have an opportunity to go be on ESPN radio and work in Bristol, you're probably going to take it. That's just the nature of the world that we live in. People, when they have opportunities, they look to move up if they're going to be more financially invested and whatnot.
Yeah, no, good point. Commissioner Brian Thornton, WAC commissioner, with us live here on the Fan Sports Network. Let's switch gears. We could talk NIL all day long. What's the latest from the WAC? What have a lot of the meetings getting ready for the upcoming season been like for you and your staff? And what are some really exciting things, or maybe what are some things that are challenges right now that you guys are working hard to solve?
It's certainly been a challenging year for college athletics. We talked about NIL, we talked about transfer portal, we talked about things like that, and that trickles down to conferences. And we certainly have been faced with some challenges. Realignment has been a part of our path, just like it has been the part of the path for a lot of other conferences, both at the highest levels. You think about the Pac-12 and what they've become, all the way down the chain. And so that's something that we continue to monitor and look at. I do think because of so many changes, there's going to continue to be opportunities as we go forward. And one of the things, we have great leadership with our athletic directors and presidents, and we'll continue to look for opportunities as time goes on to strengthen and bolster our league. We're excited about this year. It's nice when August and September hit because it finally means that we're back playing sports. The summer is, there's a lot of meetings and there's, things of that nature that are going on. But once you hit September, right now, we have women's soccer, men's soccer, volleyball, football's getting ready to kick off here shortly. So it's just excited to see the student athletes playing again. We've had a great amount of success over the last several years, especially in men's basketball. We've been very, very successful there. 4 years ago, we were the 26th ranked conference in the entire country. For the last 3 years, we've been in the top 15, and when you start to think about the conferences that are the household names and name brands, it doesn't take long to get to 15. And so we're certainly proud of that. And over the last 3 years, we've won 2 NCAA tournament games, which, for a mid-major conference, there's not a lot of, I don't know if there's any mid-major conferences that have done so. Where they've won multiple games. There's been a couple teams, whether it's St. Peter's or things like that have made a run, but to do it 2 times in the last 3 years is pretty special. And lastly, one fun fact, our conference is the last conference to beat UConn in the NCAA tournament. So the two-time defending champion New Mexico State. New Mexico State beat them 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Does it sting a little bit that the team that did win the NCAA tournament, Grand Canyon, is eventually in a couple of years going to be leaving the conference? What was your reaction when you got the news? And you've had some teams go back to the Southland, so I know it's always the realignment talk never stops.
Yeah, it's certainly frustrating. I think anytime you deal with things like that, there's going to be frustrating, but it's also understandable too. One of the things, just like with, we talk about student athletes having opportunities for continued growth and opportunity. One of the things that we've tried to do here at the WAC is elevate our programs. And, we try to elevate our conference and elevate our brands. And, if that ends up leading to, institutions seeking other opportunities, then, the reason that they seek that is because we helped elevate them to a point where they became extremely attractive. So I think that means we're doing our job well. From a conference standpoint, it's obviously frustrating because you have to deal with a lot of the issues that come from that and changing schedules and things of that nature. But they've certainly done a very, very good job the last couple of years. They've been successful. But what it does do is it provides our core membership with opportunities as well. Grand Canyon was a little bit of an anomaly in the way that they're structured. They had some financial resources and whatnot that allowed them to kind of pour into some areas differently than most other institutions, maybe even nationally.
Jerry
and
Colangelo.
So we certainly have an opportunity to have maybe a little bit more competitive equity in our league, which I think excites our institutions.
I was just going to ask real quick, final question for me as we get into it. Utah Tech now, they're going into this full Division I process, and that opens the door for them just personally at this university here. But when you talk about all the teams in the WAC kind of finding a place to settle in, what do you think there is to control longevity and have a consistency going forward in the conference?
That's a good question. Starting with Utah Tech, I know it's been a long, hard 4 years for that institution as they prepared for, full Division I membership. When they made the decision, 5-6 years ago to become a Division I school, they didn't expect all the things that we're dealing with right now. They didn't expect to have to go through COVID or a transfer portal or NIL, as we talked about. They thought it was going to be more of the traditional. You spend your 4 years, you move up, and then you start competing. One of the things that I am proud that we've done during this transitional time with Utah Tech and Tarleton State, another transitioning institution, is we opened the window for those institutions to compete in our conference championships. That was not a national practice because of maybe the optics at times when you have a transitioning institution that wins your conference championship and they're unable to be a part of the NCAA tournament, and then that creates backlash across the country. So a lot of conferences just said, you know what, we're just not going to include them because we don't want to face that type of backlash. In our case, we looked at it differently. This is about student athletes. It's about opportunities and for them to have the opportunity to compete. They came here. They can't compete at the NCAA championship level, but the least we can do is give them a championship experience through our conference championships. And so both those institutions have had that chance. In fact, Tarleton State won our baseball championship in Mesa, Arizona in May, and they were unable to compete in the NCAA tournament. But, think about that feeling for those young men that they had opportunity to close out their year with the championship.
Brian Thornton, commissioner of the WAC. Just got a couple minutes left, Brian. The partnership with ESPN, I'd heard that, UVU, SUU, and specifically Utah Tech's numbers as far as how many fans were watching on the platform has really grown, and Utah Tech has a lot of viewers. Is that true? Do you get the numbers from ESPN on how many schools games are watched on that ESPN Plus platform?
We do, and we are certainly seeing some growth in our ESPN Plus numbers. You're seeing cord cutting take place across the country, and ESPN Plus is a great platform. We're very fortunate to be partnered with them as the national leader in that area, and the ability to whether it's your phone, your tablet, your TV, to click a button and be able to watch a basketball game or a football game is pretty special. And, we'll continue to lean into that relationship with ESPN. We did a project over the course of the summer where we kind of evaluated all of the broadcast and production situations at our institution. And we have tried to invest in our conference partners and our membership and provided them some resources to do some upgrades to continue to make those broadcasts better for fans and so that they're more enjoyable when you're watching your team play, whether it be home or on the road.
Good stuff. Brian Thornton, everybody, Commissioner of the WAC, in person, in studio, hanging out with us. Do you make 3 stops because you got 3 WAC schools when you come to Utah? Do you got to get up to SUU and UVU as well?
I am going to SUU today. I'll spend some time up there. I won't be going to Utah Valley on this trip, but I'll be there a month from now for some meetings. So it's always great coming to the state of Utah. I really enjoy it. As I said, it's such a beautiful state. When you walk off the plane and you can look around, you can see the red rocks. I can remember the first time I was here. It was maybe in the fall, and I came up for a visit, and I got out of the car. I had driven up from Vegas, and the weather was perfect. It was, 6 p.m. and the sun was going down, and there was palm trees on campus. And then I looked up and I saw snow-capped mountains, and I was like, where am I? And so ever since then, this has just been, one of my favorite stops in our league. And I know that based on kind of the community and what's being poured in here, that this is the area that's going to continue to grow. It's not a hidden gem anymore. People are starting to flock here, but I hope that you guys are able to continue to build this community out.
I love it. Brian Thornton, everybody, Commissioner of the WAC. Love having you in town. Anytime you're in town, open door. We'd love to chat with you more and to keep up the good work for you and everybody in the corporate office.
I appreciate it.
All right, got to take a break. Brian Thornton.